want. They don't have that kind of equity in Social Security today. Secondly, we can generate a higher return off that investment that you get than you get in the existing system. Today you get about a 2% return in your what you pay into Social Security. We can generate, we think, at least 6%. All the evidence shows at least 3 times what we're able to get now. And long term, by generating a bigger return, we'll put additional funds into the system that will help us survive that crunch that's otherwise going to hit in the future. Bottom line is there's a choice here. With respect, frankly, to Al Gore and Joe's plan, they don't reform Social Security at all. They had another huge obligation on top of it that future generations will have to pay. They don't touch the basic system itself. They don't reform it. They don't save it. We have a plan to do that and a plan to give our young people choice and more control over their own lives.
Time. Mr. Secretary, this question is for you. Washington is a cauldron of political bickering and partisanship. The American people, gentlemen, have had enough. How would you elevate political discourse and purpose?
Well, I think there are a number of ways to do it. First of all, I agree with your assessment. I think I've been out of Washington for the last 8 years, Bernie, and spent the last 5 years running a company, global concern, and I've been out in the private sector, building a business, hiring people, creating jobs. I've got a different perspective on Washington than I had when I was there in the past. I'm proud of my service in Washington for 25 years, but also proud that I had the opportunity to go out and get a different experience. And you're absolutely right. People are fed up. They've had enough with the bickering and the partisanship that seems to characterize the debate that goes on in the nation's capital. I've seen it done differently, though. I've seen it done differently in Texas. I watched George Bush, and one of the reasons I was eager to sign on when he asked me to become his running mate was because I've been so tremendously impressed with what he's done as the governor of Texas. He came in when he had a legislature completely controlled by the other party. He managed to reach across partisan lines and unite Republicans and Democrats and independents, put them to work to achieve good things for the state of Texas, partly because he didn't point the finger of blame looking for scapegoats. He was quick to share the credit. We ended up, as a result of that activity at the end of his first term, the top Democrat in the state, Lieutenant Governor Bob Bullock, endorsed the Republican Governor George Bush for re-election. It is possible to change the tone. It is possible to get people to work together and to begin to focus on achieving results. But I think it's going to take new leadership. I don't think you can do it, with all due respect to Al Gore, with somebody who spent all the last 24 years in that Washington environment and who campaigns on the basis of castigating others, of pointing the finger of blame at others in terms of blaming business or various and sundry groups for our failings. I think you have to be able to reach out and work together and build coalitions. I think George W. Bush has done that in Texas and can do it at the national level.
Senator?
Bernie, you're absolutely right. There's too much partisanship in Washington. It puzzles me. You know, you'd think that people in public life and politics would want to do what would make them popular, and yet too often people in both parties seem to act in a way that brings down the institutions of government and each of us individually, and it's a shame. I have tried very hard in my career to call them as I see them and work with colleagues on both sides of the aisle to get things done, and I'm proud of my record in that regard, and I certainly think that would be an asset that I could bring to the vice presidency should I be fortunate enough to be elected. I mean, in my Senate career, I've worked with Bob Dole, for instance, on Bosnia, and I worked with John McCain on cultural values. I worked with Connie Mack on foreign policy. I worked with Don Nichols on the International Religious Freedom Act. If I go on much longer, I'm going to get in trouble with my own party. But the fact is that that's the way things get done, and I'm proud of those partnerships. And let me say a word about Al Gore. In his years in the House and the Senate, he formed similar bipartisan partnerships. If you look back over the last 8 years, the most significant accomplishments of this administration, in which Al Gore was centrally involved, were the result, most of them, of bipartisan agreements. I mean, after all, the Welfare Reform Act, which Al Gore promised to lead the effort on to get people off of welfare, to set time limits, to get people to enjoy the dignity of work, that was a bipartisan act that was adopted. The Anti-Crime Act, which has lowered crime or helped to lower crime More than 20% in our country today also is bipartisan. And then the Balanced Budget Act of 1997, which was critical to getting our economy to the point and our government to the point of unprecedented surplus we enjoy today, also was bipartisan, and Al Gore was involved. So I'd say that's exactly the kind of bipartisan leadership that he and I can bring to Washington to get things done.
With all due respect, Joe, there's just an awful lot of evidence that there has not been any bipartisan leadership out of this administration or out of Al Gore. And the fact is the Medicare problems have not been addressed. We've had 8 years of promises on prescription drugs and no action. The Social Security problem has not been addressed. We've had 8 years of talk and no action. The educational problem has not been addressed. We have 8 years of talk and no action. They've been in a position of responsibility in the White House, the powerful interest, if you will, in Washington, D.C., and they've been unable to work with others. Medicare is a classic example. You had the Broe Commission, a good effort at a bipartisan solution for Medicare. Whether you bought or didn't buy the answer that was generated, the fact is the administration helped set it up and then pulled the plug on it because they'd rather have the issue than they would the solution. This administration has not led from a bipartisan standpoint, and I really do think that Al Gore's record in this regard isn't very good.
Bernie, Dick Cheney must be one of the few people in America who thinks that nothing has been accomplished in the last 8 years. I mean, the fact is that promises were made and promises were kept. I mean, did Al Gore make promises in 1992? Absolutely. Did he deliver? Big time, if I may put it that way. And that's the record. Look at the 22 million new jobs. Look at the 4 million new businesses. Look at the lower interest rates, low rate of inflation, high rate of growth. I think if you asked most people in America today that famous question that Ronald Reagan asked, are you better off today than you were 8 years ago, most people would say yes. And I'm pleased to see, Dick, from the newspapers that you're better off than you were 8 years ago, too.
And most of it, and I can tell you, Joe, that the government had absolutely nothing to do with it.
Interesting.
This question is to you, but
I can see my wife, and I think she's thinking, gee, I wish she would go out into the private sector.
Well, I'm going to try to help you do that, Joe.
No, I think you've done so well there. I want to keep you there.
Okay.
Dick Cheney, Joe Lieberman, you are black for this question. Imagine yourself an African American. You become the target of racial profiling, either while walking or driving. African American Joseph Lieberman, what would you do about it?
I'd be outraged. It is such an assault on the basic promise that America makes that the law will treat individuals as individuals regardless of their status, that is to say their race, their nationality, their gender, their sexual orientation, etc., etc. And the sad fact is that racial profiling occurs in this country. I have a few African American friends who've gone through this horror, and you know, it makes me want to kind of hit the wall because it is such an assault on their humanity and their citizenship. We can't tolerate it anymore. That's why I've supported legislation in the first instance in Congress, because it's the most we could get